Well, happy Tuesday, everyone.
Happy Tuesday, Dave.
Yeah, that was calm and just sweet and kind.
Mr. Rogers-y.
Yeah. I just put on a sweater if you're listening. Welcome to Revival, the Good News Podcast. I'm Dave Butler.
I'm Stephan Taeger.
If you're an old friend, this is us just giving you a little squeeze. If you're a new friend, welcome. We'll give you a squeeze next time when you're an old friend. I don't know what any of that means. Stephan's got me in a mood because he's wearing his tweed jacket. But
do you own a tweed jacket, Dave?
I do not own a tweed jacket.
Why not?
What?
Because your brand is flip-flops and shorts.
Yeah. It might not always be my brand, but currently it is. In fact, we pick a fake sponsor for every episode, and it's going to be my favorite flip-flop company, Rainbow Flip-Flops.
Oh, I didn't know you'd heard of them before.
Yeah, they make these really nice leather ones.
Wow.
So I'll get you some. This is fancy. This is up your alley for fancy. This is called Revival, Good News Podcast, because that's what we try to focus on every week. A little bit of good news. We use conference talks to be kind of our source for that. And we pick 3 different headlines from it that we think are just good news headlines, things that just remind us of what's so thrilling and cool about living a life of faith.
Yeah.
Because I think you ought to be swallowed up in good news. This is not to ignore any of the bad news that happens globally or in our own lives, or any of the difficulties in living in a community of faith, or, all the above. But it's to face all of those in the context of the overwhelming good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So
it's awesome.
That's good. Someone should write that down. That was a good really byline for what are you doing on that podcast?
Yeah, that was really good. Dave.
Today our talk is by Hal, President Eyring. All will be well.
Do you know him well enough to call him that?
No, but he calls himself Hal, so I feel like it's justifiable. He's just whenever he talks about himself, he always says or tells stories. He's like, Hal, And so I just feel like that's what I would call him.
Is there a kinder human on the planet than Henry B. Eyring?
Nope.
There's
I'm
no one
confident.
kinder.
I think there's 7 billion people. I've not met all of them, but I already know. I already know.
Yeah.
I'm certain of it.
Yeah. He's the kind of person that you just listen to and learn about, and you're like, oh, I need to be a better human.
Yeah. You have a calmness to your demeanor, and your spirit is so pure.
Yeah.
He reminds me of this friend of mine. Actually, I have a friend who reminds me of him. Yeah, 2. I have 2.
Wow.
Yeah. And one time we were all going somewhere together, and they wanted me to ride in their car with them, and I drove separate because I was afraid that car was going to be taken to heaven like Elijah's chariot. And I did not want to anchor them to this planet. I legit thought they were not going to arrive at the destination because I was like, the 2 of you in a car.
Swing low, sweet chariot.
Yeah. So anyways, that's my feelings about this gentleman who I just admire so much. Okay, so we picked 3 headlines each, by the way. 3 good news headlines. And Stephan always goes first because he's bossy like that.
Okay, here's number 3.
I have 2 backups on this one, so I don't even care if you steal one of mine.
Okay, all right. I'm glad you have some backups.
I have a sense of peace.
Frequent participation in the ordinances of the temple can create a pattern of devotion to the Lord. Okay, so one of the things that for someone who may be outside of our tradition, you should know about our tradition of faith, is that we place a high emphasis on how the rituals and ordinances of Christianity bring us closer to God. And the first principle of the restored gospel, our tradition, is faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. That's absolutely foundational. It is the first step, right? But that faith is manifested through ritual. One of the ways of participating and living out the implications of ritual. He says when you keep your temple...
And can I just ask you this? Would you say that you would call a daily habit or ritual? Sometimes we think of ritual as official church ritual, as designated by someone other than me,
right?
And or personal ritual.
Yeah, and I would say the rituals of Christianity or the restored gospel are central, and then there are other personal rituals that support those or train our hearts.
Yeah.
In fact, I want to read a quote from a scholar about ritual in just a second, but He says, when you keep your temple covenants and remember them, you invite the companionship of the Holy Ghost to both strengthen and purify you. So first and foremost, I want to say there's an element of the divine here, of spirituality, that can't be captured by some scholarly quote like the one I'm about to read. So there's something spiritual and profound that cannot be explained in a scholarly way about the power of God as it's manifested through baptism or the Lord's Supper, or we call it the sacrament, or temple ritual.
Wait, this is interesting that you're bringing this up, because this morning I was thinking, I was like, oh, I would love to have your thoughts on this, and you're already going there, of like, obviously there's something like a scholar can point to about the significance psychologically of ritual.
Right.
Like there's got to be like a psychology of ritual that people have studied and are smart
I'm
about.
actually going to read that to you in a second.
Yeah. But then I wondered if you were going to say, in addition to that, there's something unexplainable.
No question. Right.
About just God's coming into that experience in a way that's like above and beyond whatever psychological benefit may come from ritual.
Yes. And in some ways, that's the more interesting aspect, that if you could explain it away or control it or understand it perfectly, it then sort of loses its power on us. And in some sense, that's the most important part of this, is that we can't explain it all, right? And it would be, you're no longer dealing with God if you can explain it all away and understand it, right? He's too interesting, too mysterious, too powerful, too beyond our capacity to understand, to explain it, right?
You want something to be unexplainable.
Right.
As much as we want to explain something, deep down, or maybe not even deep down, you want it to be unexplainable because it's bigger than what you could manipulate or you could help create.
Yeah, and I'll say this really quickly, that I don't know if you can really love something that you can explain or control. There has to be something other about it.
Yeah.
For you to like have this constant feel of like, I want to be closer to God and my loved ones in that sense, but I never want to treat them as an object.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so can I read this quote with all of those caveats in mind?
Yeah.
Okay. This is from James K.A. Smith. Our ultimate love.
James K.A. Smith.
Yeah, he's a Christian philosopher.
I like that he took two middle names.
With a name like James Smith, you have to.
Yeah, true.
Our ultimate love is orientated by and to a picture of what we think it looks like for us to live well. And that picture then governs, shapes, and motivates our decisions and actions. He then continues. So think about the temple. Think about the house of the Lord and how it's a picture of what we think it means to live well.
Mm-hmm.
It is important to emphasize that this is a picture. This is why I have emphasized that we are fundamentally non-cognitive affective creatures. What that means is, yes, we have thinking capacity, but at our core, we are embodied beings who have loves. The telos, or that philosophy word means like the point of something to which our love is aimed, is not a list of ideas or propositions or doctrines. It is not a list of abstract, disembodied concepts or values. Rather, the reason that this vision of the good life moves us is because it is a more affective, sensible, even aesthetic picture of what the good life looks like. A vision of the good life captures our hearts and imaginations not by providing a set of rules or ideas, but by painting a picture of what it looks like for us to flourish and live well. This is why such pictures are communicated most powerfully in stories, legends, myths, plays, novels, and films, rather than dissertations, messages, and monographs. So I have a question for you. If you were to describe to someone what's the vision of the good life, the purpose of life that the temple offers, what would you say? What would you say is the vision, the picture that it's trying to paint in our hearts and in our spirits?
Well, my first thought goes to two thoughts, actually. One, in the temple endowment ceremony, we're shown a picture of the seventh day of creation. And it's like this beautiful garden and this man and this woman together with the commission to like multiply and replenish, like improve this and enjoy this. And, you know, a walk into the celestial room is my other image and picture too, particularly when like a friend or, you know, family member is going through the ceremony for their first time and you're all there together. Like there's just like something about that that's like, oh, this is sort of feels ideal.
Right.
You know, if there were a wiffle ball field in the celestial room, it would feel even more ideal. just in the back corner or something like that. But like just this idea.
That's sacrilegious.
Oh, bro. No, it's not. Oh my goodness. I know that's what the good Lord is doing.
I love wiffle ball.
Yeah. But there's something about that feels like it's relationship centered. We feel like, I don't know. Yeah.
It's God.
The funny thing is like me just saying like, I can't really describe it. Validates what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. It shows in living color that God is loving and good, that family and relationships is what we're here for.
Yeah.
And to be bound to God and to others. And creation is good, and to enjoy the goodness of what God has given us on this earth,
Yeah.
That was long. I'm sorry. I took up a lot there, but I
told y'all he's wearing that tweed jacket today, and he was going to hit one out of the park, even though we don't know if he likes football.
So let me just read the sentence again from President Eyring for my number 3. Frequent participation in the ordinances of the temple can create a pattern of devotion to the Lord. So go in and see that vision. Let that seep into your heart and let it direct the way you live in the world.
That's awesome. Okay, this is my number 3. Is in the paragraph right after it. It's number 20 if you have the numbered one. Every covenant with God is an opportunity to draw closer to Him. And I just think, just along those same lines of ritual, that we can get caught up in the supposed tos, or the list mentality of what it looks like to be a good Latter-day Saint or a good Christian or a good member of any religious tradition. And it could be remarkably easy to live out like the facets of faith without considering that their purpose is to draw us closer to Him. This has been like a drum that's been the rhythm of my life and thought processes for like several years now. That just like, oh man, there is something about making sure religious tradition is about relationship with God and other people. That God has given us opportunities and patterns of living for the sole purpose of drawing us closer to Him. Well, maybe not the sole purpose, but the initial purpose.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a really good windfall that comes from drawing closer to Him. But I would say that, those are secondary to what He was. Sometimes I go back and forth with like, okay, does God want us to be in rich, living relationship with Him, or does He want us to be happy? But I was like, oh, wait, He wants us to be happy, but the way to be happy seems to be, living in that kind of relationship. But I just am... Every time a line like that shows up, I love it. I'm drawn to it. And I feel like that's good news that He wants to. And there's another line in there that He says He won't abandon this relationship with those who forge that bond with Him. He's wildly more committed to it than we are.
Yeah.
As desperately as we need it or want it, like we're in a lack, right? And so we actually need a relationship with God and want to feel loved. And it's interesting that it feels like God is like lacking nothing,
Mm-hmm.
And yet He is more committed to the relationship than we are, is fascinating to me and really good news.
Yeah, it means that He loves us not because He needs us in some kind of insecure way, but that He loves us because He just wants us to be with Him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be quick on this one because I took so long on my first one.
No one's sad.
Okay. All right, number 2. He's talking about this dramatic event that happened while he was in Idaho, and the Grand Teton Dam broke, and all of these people were going to lose their homes, and they were, President Eyring and his wife were actually separated from their sons. And I think they're in a hotel, right? A motel room.
A motel?
Right,
Like,
absolutely.
This is like it's a tragedy getting worse.
President Eyring writes this, and sometimes faithful disciples remind you of the Savior. And you can see the love of God and particularly the life of Jesus reflected in their behavior. And this is one of these moments. I'll see if you can catch it, Dave, okay? He says, despite my own concerns...
Got it. Just kidding.
He says, I was able to put my mind at ease and fall asleep. It wasn't long thereafter that my sweet eternal companion woke me up and said, How can you sleep at a time like this? Do you catch it?
Hal? That's what I was distracted by. That showed up right there.
These words then came clearly to my heart and mind. I said to my wife, Kathy, whatever the outcome, all will be well because of the temple. We have made covenants with God and have been sealed as an eternal family. I thought of Jesus on the boat, and there's storm and everything's falling apart and he's asleep. And I'll just say this really quickly. There's quite a bit of research now that says people who are present, not worrying about the future, not worrying about the past, are the most happy, the most joyous, who are alive to the moment. And that comes in its most profound way when we know that God will make all things right in the end, particularly through the covenants we've made with him, because Jesus Christ manifests his grace through those covenants is one of the primary ways that he does that. All will be set right. And that allows me to be fully in the moment and not have to worry about the past or the future.
That's awesome. And I'm going to switch some of mine around and make my second one that one because of that line there where it says, Kathy and I knelt together in our motel room. And just that idea that I cannot imagine what the Idaho Falls, I don't even know where they are, local motel is like.
I'm sure it's beautiful.
I'm sure it's nice. It's lovely. Swipe up for a 10% discount. But I was just captured by the fact how simple it is to walk into heaven anywhere that you are in the midst of tragedy and worry. And they were separated from their kids with no cell phones and no communication at all, right? Like that's wild. It's wild to like rewind time to that again and say, that's so like, how did we find each other? What the heck? What did we even do? I can't even remember. I cannot even recall how we functioned without Find My Friends. Like I just like
part of me is like, can we go back to
yeah. There is some appeal that's there. But this image of them kneeling together in this motel room, this sweet couple putting their trust in God and finding heaven in the midst of a disaster is like, I think that it's so beautiful to me. Like I just loved that picture. And that to me was like, seems like a funny headline from the Talk to Love, but I love that one.
That's fantastic. Okay, you ready for my number one?
Number one. I'm mixing all up. I don't even know where my number one is, but go ahead.
Okay, all right.
Steal one of mine so I don't have to decide.
So there's a setup for this, and there's just a tiny little line or phrase that he adds that makes this particular paragraph I'm about to read, just for me, really powerful. He says this is Christian parenting. Consistent care of brothers and sisters for each other will come only with persistent efforts to lead your family in the Lord's way. Give children opportunities to pray for each other.
Oh, I did love this advice.
How many parenting books say that, right? Those are great. I love all that stuff, right? Discern quickly the beginnings of discord and positively recognize acts of unselfish service, especially to one another. When siblings pray for each other and serve each other, hearts will be softened and turn to each other and to their parents. And then he says this, in part, this is what is described by Malachi as he foretold the coming of the prophet Elijah. He shall plant in the hearts of the children the promises made to the fathers, and the hearts of the children shall turn to their fathers. If it were not so, the whole earth would be utterly wasted at his coming.
For the record, I knew you were going to pick this as your number one.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. When I read it, I was like, this is going to be Stephan's number one. I already know.
That verse is in the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. It's in all of the standard works. And if I'm reading President Eyring right, he's saying that love that exists in the family isn't partially a manifestation of God's power turning hearts to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so the temple binds us to God and beautifully, and you've seen this, Dave, I've seen this, that families who are living within their temple covenants as Christians, grace is coming into their hearts and turning their love towards each other.
Yeah.
So thankful for that. I thank God for that power restored on the earth again.
I love how you've taught me before just the practicality of those.
Yeah.
Like there might be a legalism to temple covenants that I'm not emotionally drawn to. I could be persuaded, I think,
Yeah.
I think there's like an element to that we've talked about before, but there is this practicality of the power that flows into like a Tuesday afternoon
Right.
at the dinner table.
Right.
In fact, my number one line was this one. as we attend the temple, and I want to be careful, and I know President Eyring knows this, so this is not a correction of anything written in here. But when we say temple and we say covenants, they're powerful because they're building, binding, protective connections with the Father and the Son. Like they're symbols of that relationship. Like the temple's not powerful. Covenants are not powerful. God is. And it's that highway we've opened up, between us and that for that power to flow. So, but he says there can come to us a dimension of spirituality and a feeling of peace. And I would say, like we started this, one it's unexplainable. Anyone can feel spirituality and anyone can feel peace, but there's degrees to it and there's dimensions to it and there's richness levels to it. And I think we're being taught about a rich dimension of relationship, of spirituality, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, a love, a draw toward each other and goodness that come to those who are living in that kind of relationship with God. And it's a gift. That's a gift. It's a fruit of that relationship that's beautiful. So beautiful.